In this tutorial, we're going to model a Roman Gladius. I have provided a max file that has reference already set up for you. I'm going to click on the front viewport, come up here to the corner and say maximize viewport. So I'm going to Alt-Z to go into my zoom, and zoom in a little bit. Use my middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to come over here and turn off the grid. Alright, so there's a number of ways that we can build this sword. Since a Roman Gladius has a lot of round shapes on it, I think we could probably use some of our spline modeling skills. So I'm going to use Alt-Z to zoom in here. Alright, so I'm going to start by coming over here to Shape. I'm going to go to Line, and I'm just going to start drawing out this shape. And I kind of want to start with my first point somewhere near the center. Right, so let's say we start like right about here. I'm going to come over and what I'm doing is I'm just dropping points in at the peaks and valleys on this, because I could honestly spend a lot of time trying to go through and build this in such a way that as I'm drawing out the spline, I try and match every single curve, but that can get really frustrating quick. So I like to just drop in as many points to kind of block out the general shape, and then I go to modify, as I have here. I'm going to click on the little arrow down and go into vertex. Now I'm going to start refining my shape. I click on a point, I right click and say move. So I'm going to move these points so they all kind of line up. I want to kind of hit this generally trying to hit the center of this shape is what I'm going for here. This guy will kind of come in kind of right underneath there. This point is actually, looks like he's a Bezier. I'm going to right click on him and convert him over to be a corner. And then I think I'm going to come in here with my refine and add like 2 more points. There we go. I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to point there on that edge. Come down here. I think I'm going to delete that one because I'm just going to end up capping that off anyways later. Alright, let's find out where these go. So he kind of comes up here. One more point. Kind of bring him over. He sits out here on the edge. Let's refine him with 2 more points. That's not enough. Let's go ahead and I'm going to split the difference here and refine it again. So think of it like this. I get 1 point that kind of sits in the middle, and then I have 2 points to kind of round out the edge there. I am making this entire object entirely out of corner points. I don't really want to use Bezier because I don't want it to be like super smooth. I'm trying to avoid that for this sword. I'm going to grab this point here and down at the I'm going to make sure I'm on move, and down at the very bottom I'm just going to make sure this point sits at 0, right? So he's centered in the world. And then let's just grab another point, refine, move him up. Oops. Alright, so I kind of got that shape. Let's do this. Let's kind of center him down a little bit. These guys, I could probably get a little bit more form. So let's grab all these points here. We're just going to come to chamfer and enter like 0.5. And I lost all my shapes, so I'm going to undo that. Let's go up to the top and undo it. Let's do 0.1, and that's not enough. So I'm going to undo that. Lots of trial and error, so we'll do 0.25. That gives me some nice shapes. So let's grab these. Well, I'm going to grab everything that I just did that to, right click on them, and say corner. Now I'm going to go through, I'm going to region select, and then I'm going to hold control. I'm going to get every one of these groups of 2 that makes up kind of that inner part. I'm going to go to scale, and I'm going to adjust my pivot point center to be the selection center. And I'm just going to grab this x-axis and just drag that to the left until all those guys are perfectly aligned. It's a little hack to do that, but it works. Let's kind of move them back a little bit, and let's just grab those outer edges. All those points that make that outer line. We'll do the same thing, go into scale, scale all them out, right click and then move them. And then looks like I just gotta adjust this guy manually. Alright, I think we're probably looking pretty good with it. Let's check. What I need to do now is I'm going to come up here and select lathe. And then default for lathe usually isn't going to work, right? Let's just try min. Now what min did was it took it and just basically centered it, and that's pretty much exactly what I want. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's get out of here and look in perspective. And I think that's looking really solid. Right? It'll help if you take a look at what Roman Gladius swords look like. That'll give you a good sense kind of some of those shapes and form. Alright, so I'm going to Alt-W to make this full screen. So I like this, I like how it looks. I'm going to go to display and find display properties, which just collapse all these until you find it. And you want to turn on backface cull and then go back to modify. I'm going to Alt-W to minimize, maximize, and I can see it. There it is. If I orbit around, you see the bottom where I deleted those segments, you see inside it. You see it's inside. There's nothing on the inside, which is perfect. It means the polygons are facing out. So I'm going to right click on these guys and say convert to editable poly. There we go. Let's go into element. Click on this, and under the rollout called polygon smoothing groups, you may have to collapse until you find it. I'm going to hit auto smooth so that now if I Alt W in perspective to make this full screen, before it was really faceted, but now it looks much nicer. Oh, I think I forgot to weld the vertices up at the very top of this guy, so I think we're going to do a little optimization real quick. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to region select everything that makes up those points and make sure I just get them. If you had any geometry on the bottom, you would want to zoom out and orbit around, make sure there's nothing you selected as well, because what I'm going to do here is just hit delete. So up here on the top of this guy, I've just deleted those polygons. So let's take a look here. One thing that I like to do is I don't like to have it come to triangles. What I like to do is actually come in here and build that shape. So I'm in edge, I'm going to go to bridge, and I'm just going to click on one edge to another, and it's going to build geometry. Why don't I click here and turn on default shading and edged faces so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I click on one edge and click on another, and bridge will build those polygons then. And then I'm just going to grab this one edge here, and under selection I'm going to click ring, and then I'm going to click on the connect button, which I haven't done anything, so my connect just connects with one edge, which is what I wanted. And now I can go into target weld. I can target weld this edge over and this edge over, and now that kind of cleaned that up. It's got a nice shape, it's not a bunch of triangles. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the bottom part of this sword. So I'm going to click here where it says top and change it to bottom and zoom out. Alright, so it was nice before because we had these kind of shaded edges coming in. We don't have that with the bottom, but we do see, since he is coming all the way out, we can kind of tell where he's at. So what we could do is here in edge, or in the front, I'm going to region select right here to get these two edges. Now let's orbit around. We see we just have two. I'm going to click bridge, and I'll bridge them together. If bridge doesn't work for you when you click on it, it means you probably have more than two selected, or you have geometry down here, which you'll have to remove. Alright, so now that I've kind of made those, I'm going to come over here to this bottom view I made and maximize the viewport, because now I know exactly where my edge is I could probably just click and bridge between these guys. And so that goes through, that kind of cleans that up. Let's go ahead and grab this edge again and hit ring. I'm going to connect it and then use target weld to target weld this guy over. All right, and so now I have what's called an airtight mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit T to turn this into a top view. I'm going to click on this little point here and say restore viewport. And then Z to zoom out in each of my viewports. All right, let's go back into element, grab this and say auto smooth. So let's take a look here from the side. So one thing about a Gladius is that, well, everything up here is flat. The actual handguard itself is usually, it's made, it's kind of oval in shape. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come in here to polygon and we're going to click and region select everything here on the bottom. I'm going to put, I'm going to try putting an FFD 4x4x4. That's freeform deformation 4x4x4. Before I do that, I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected. I'm going to do edit, clone as a copy. I'm going to right click and say free selection. So now I can come in here and click again, and if I try moving out here, you'll see, hey, there's two of them. All right, so I'm going to try and do something weird. I'm actually going to hover over my edge and drag this up so I could kind of zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to orbit around. Okay, so this is the left view I'm working in. So, just to recap, I've selected all the polygons that make up the handguard, and I'm placing an FFD 4x4x4, which can be found in the modifier list if you haven't set up your modifiers. I'm just going to come in here, I'm going to go click on control points. I'm going to grab this outer row and this other outer row. I'm not going to select the ones in the middle. I'm going to right click and go into scale. I'm going to grab that x-axis and just scale those in. Now, you see how it's pinching that inside edge? So I did it too much. I'm going to undo that. I'm just going to bring them in a little bit. And then I'm going to grab these center edges. I'm going to bring those out. Let's right click and say hide unselected and orbit around and see how that looks. It's looking pretty good. It's a little bit too much. I'm just going to remove that 4x4. I'm going to put a fresh one on. So I think what I want to do is just grab those outer edges. Here again in the left view, I'm just going to scale them in just a little bit. Maybe about halfway where this polygon is, and then grab these center ones, and I'm just going to scale those out by hovering over X and just moving it right along there. Now if I right click and hide unselected, I think that looks pretty good. If I want to get really, try and be really creative with it, I can grab, I'm going to right click here over on my edge and say reset layout and then zoom back in. I could grab just the corners here, and I could try bringing those in a little bit more if I want to get a little bit more of an oval shape. And so the freeform just is a way to kind of control kind of the overall shape. I think I'm going to bring them in so that if you look at this, I've scaled those outer corners in to match the inner line. And I kind of like that overall oval shape that gave me. I think that's looking pretty good. That looks like a nice Gladius. So I'm going to right click and convert to edit poly. I'm going to go into polygon mode and click in negative space so I have nothing selected on this guy and hit Z. Let's right click and say unhide all. And then we got our reference back. Ooh, and let's unfreeze all. I'm going to click on Editable Poly, and let's get my Scene Explorer. So Tools, Scene Explorer. Now my Scene Explorer is back. You can see if I click line 2, that's my second handle. I'm just going to click delete and get rid of him. There we go. All right, so we're almost done with this guy. I'm going to click here to maximize the viewport. The last thing we got to do is we just got to get our sword blade. Now, when I did unfreeze all, that made my reference something I could select, and I don't want that. So I'm going to right click on it again and say freeze selection. All right, so let's finish off this blade. I think that the way we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and draw a rectangle. Just going to click and drag. And then I'm going to go over here to modify and just, if I switch to move, I'm going to make sure that X is sitting at 0. And I'm going to right click on that and say edit spline. There we go. Perfect. Let's grab all those rectangle points, right click on one and say convert to, under tools 1, we're going to make them all corners. So just grab these guys and bring them down a little bit. Looks like, yeah. All right. I'm going to come in here and in segment mode, I'm going to grab the two sides and I'm going to scroll down under geometry until I find divide. Divide is set to 1. I'm going to click on that. And then I can go into vertex, grab those new points and just drag those down to where the sword blade starts to come in together. And I can scale those. Just need to make sure my selection is on use selection center. There we go. And then I can grab the two at the very bottom and I can go to my weld, which is under geometry, and set that to a very high level, like 500, and click weld. Alright, so that gives me kind of my base for my sword. I think what I'll do next is I'm going to use a modifier called bevel. Alright, and so bevel has, it's pretty neat in how it can actually do its work. I'm going to collapse editable spline so I can make this a little bit taller. Nah, I'm going to leave it so you can have bevel on the side. Alright, so basically you have 3 layers of height. So let's go out here, click on the little plus sign, say restore viewport. Alright, there we go. So right now it's flat, so let's give it a height of 1. And actually I think we'll probably, it's a sword blade, so we should probably do like a 0.5. And we'll do height 2 to a height of 0.5. You can see there you go, you got your kind of basic, your shapes. Now what I can do is give it an outline. Like I can say, because I want it, let's right click on this guy and say object properties and just set them to like 0.5 so you can kind of see this blade underneath. So I do kind of want it to angle in a little bit. So let's actually give it an outline of 1. Oops, we need to make that -1. And then the start outline above it we can set to -1 as well. And then with level 1 we change that to 1. And so now we're saying, okay, when you start you're kind of a little bit smaller, you get bigger and you get smaller. And so you can see how that kind of starts to give us this sort of shape. So this blade actually, if I click and drag here, it give me kind of some idea how much I maybe want this to go. Maybe I'll just take this up all the way to -3. And so let's set our start outline to -3. And then our main outline will go out to 3. And so that's how it kind of starts to build up this sword. So you can kind of see them there, right? It's very sharp. It's getting to a point. Right? I think it's looking pretty good. So here's what we'll do. We're going to right click and under object properties we're going to make him fully opaque because he's a little hard to look at. Alright. So I'm going to click on this little color swatch, make him a slightly darker color. Right click and convert to editable poly. And then here at the top I'm just going to region select and I'm going to hold Alt and deselect because I want to grab these polygons that make up the very top and I'm going to delete them. I'm going to grab the vertex points and I'm going to find my edit geometry rollout and I'm going to use my make planar. I'm going to try make planar X, which does not do what I want. What I'm trying to do is get them all kind of flush. I could just grab these vertex points and move them up so they sit up there. If I switch this to wireframe by hitting F3, you can kind of see them set there. I could grab them, and I think it's, if I align them on Y, yeah. Now let's just sit it. Yeah, they're sitting slightly inside the handguard, which is perfect. All right. So at this point, he's looking really good. I think that we could either keep him flat there, or we could go through and we could actually just go ahead and, if I go back to this as a front view, I can region select both these, and actually under edit vertices, there's a button called connect, which will connect those edges together. And then if I region select, and the reason I'm region selecting is so that I select edges in both the front and the back, I'm going to hit ring and then hit collapse, and those collapse those down to a point. The last thing I got to do to clean this up is that left these little vertex points here. So if I just click on that one point, say remove, he's gone. If I orbit around to the back, and sometimes orbiting helps if you select a point. Say remove, click on this guy, zoom out a little bit, orbit around the back, and I had already removed that one. So there we go. Now we have a Roman Gladius. All right, I think it's looking pretty good. I can go into element, and this guy, just say auto smooth, and that smooths them out. This may be one where we actually go through and manually assign smoothing groups, like this. Let's go through, go into element, grab it, find that polygon smoothing groups, roll out, say clear all. And then here in polygon, I'm going to make sure I'm on select when I do this, select object. So I can select these points and say year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. So that now, when you look at them, you see how it shades like a sword. The last step would be to select the handle here, and I'm going to, on the handle, you'll notice his pivot is off to the side. That's an artifact of how it was when we made him as a spline shape. I'm going to come in here and say effect pivot only and center to object. So now the pivot is centered on the object. Next I'm going to grab the handle or the blade, and I'm going to do effect pivot only and center to object on that. And so then let's just select our handle in a movement mode, make sure that we're lined up on X and Y on Z, or X and Y are at 0. We're not going to worry about Z. And then I'll select the blade and make sure that's at 0 for both. So now they're both centered. And now I'm going to grab the handle, go into modify, and under edit poly, I'm going to find my edit geometry rollout and attach that blade together. All right. Now I'll just select this. I'm going to call this Gladius. And that's how you make a Roman Gladius.